I want to introduce you to Nicky Hockly. I know her from many years ago. She's a very good professional and very good person and for everything. She has been writing many articles in Linguistic professional and English language teaching journal. And he has been the author of some of the books. Some of them are very well known as Teaching Online and Digital Literacies. Okay, and she's co-coordinator in Learning Technologies in the Association. Okay, I leave you with her, and thank you very much for coming. I hope you will enjoy it.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. I've known Maria for probably 10 years, right? In the web history.
Yeah, the web history.
Yes, right, well, thank you for coming. I'm leaving the windows open, if that's okay, for a while, because it's 2 hours and it gets warm and there are a lot of us. But we can close them before it gets cold. Before we start, though, can I just check? How many of you are teachers, practicing teachers at the moment? Could you put your hand up? Okay, almost everybody. Okay, if you're a primary school teacher, would you put your hand up? Nobody. All right, secondary? 3 of you. 4. University? So that's the majority. Okay. If you're involved in teacher training, could you put your hand up? You've got teacher and teacher training. Okay, like those of you who haven't put your hands up, are you sure you're in the right classroom? Going to the tourism seminars. Is there anybody I haven't covered who's not in any of those categories? Maybe an academic manager, student. Yes, a language student.
Not a student.
Student, you're an English language student.
Yes.
Okay, great.
No, but adult teaching and French institutions.
Okay, so you teach French. Fine, that's fine. The kinds of things we're going to look at can be applied pretty much to any language, I think. Okay, it is 2 hours, so there's going to be pair work. It's physically impossible for you to listen to me for 2 hours without, completely losing it. So we're going to start off with a little bit of a chat to bring up some of the issues and the challenges and the choices that are involved in using mobile devices in the classroom. So this is just a chance for you to share any experience. So it says, should students use their mobile devices or class sets? If you do either of those things, this is the time to tell the people that you're talking to about what you do, okay? Okay, I see none of you have experienced that type of management technique before, very few of you. The way of getting a large group of people to be silent very fast is just to be silent yourself and hold up your hand. And you can train your students that when they see you do that, they have to stop talking and hold up their hand. Okay, and it always works. So instead of going, quiet now, everybody, just do that and you wait. And it always works. Thank you.
10 minutes?
10 minutes.
What's the limit of your waiting time?
Okay. I think the secret is training your students. It always works. Once they know that that's the kind of drill, instead of you having to shout. Okay, so these are some of the typical things that teachers ask me about using mobile devices in the class. Typical things that they may be concerned about or they're not sure how to handle. And we're going to come back to these questions. But first, are there any of you in the group who've used mobile devices in class, in the classroom, with your students? Could you put up your hand? 1, 2. Could you tell us very briefly what you do, what you've done?
Yes, I invited them to record themselves in front of a well-known landmark of the city and to talk about what was important about that place for them.
Okay, great. Okay, so they recorded themselves on mobile phones and mobile devices?
Yes.
Great. Okay, in pairs, working in pairs, individually, selfies?
They worked individually, but they were allowed to work in person. They chose to do so.
Great, lovely. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, it was like using Twitter, and they have to try, I gave them some texts, and they have to try to summarize the pieces of news they read into 140 characters. So.
Lovely. So they were reading news articles in the newspaper or from TV or?
Well, they come from Corpus, from Michigan Corpus, and they are related to education because they are going to be teachers So it has to be more.
Right, so in teacher training, and of course you could use it with language students. You get them to read a newspaper article or watch a news item and then tweet it as a summary. It's a lovely idea. So they actually composed the tweets and did that in class?
Yes.
Yeah, you had a Wi-Fi connection in your
Yeah.
classroom. Okay, great. And there was a link here.
I just tried an application which is called Telegami.
Telegami,
Yesterday.
yeah.
They presented themselves and they talked about what they liked and what they didn't like in French. And we took a picture of what they had written and they talked in front of us.
Lovely. Okay, so Telegami is basically an animated cartoon figure. So the idea is that you record your voice and then the animated cartoon figure speaks. So it's a slightly less threatening way perhaps than actually video recording yourself. Speaking, you can use as cartoon characters, especially if students are lower level and less confident with the language. That kind of, mask, if you like, can work very effectively. Yeah, so great. The name of the app is Telegami. Tellegami. Telegami. And it was free yesterday, wasn't it? I think I saw it was free. You could download it. I don't know if it's closed today, but it's very nice. So we'll come back to these, okay? Thank you for sharing your experiences. And as we go along, those of you who have used mobile devices, please do chip in based on your own stuff. Okay, we're going to start off by using your mobile devices. So take out your phones, or if you have a tablet, whichever you prefer. Any kind of phone is okay. Any phone. Doesn't have to be a smartphone. You've already got phones in front of you. Great. Okay, I'm going to give you a very short dictation, so you need to open something that you can take dictation in. Either the note-taking app on your phone, or if you have a very basic mobile phone, just the SMS function. Okay, so you need to be able to type. I'll give you a minute to open up your note-taking app and get ready to type. Actually, it looks like most of you have got smartphones or tablets, from what I can see. Almost everybody here. Good. Okay, you ready? You opened up your note-taking app. All right, this dictation is a little bit different. I'm not going to dictate words, I'm going to dictate individual letters. So as I say the letter, you type the letter. Then I say the next letter and you type. I'm only going to say each letter once. So if you don't get it, don't worry, just leave it and carry on. All right? The idea is to get down the letters as I type. So, ready? Okay. W, H, A, T, D, O, Y, O, U, U, S, E, Y, O, U, R, P, H, O, N, E, F, O, R, question mark. We're going to continue. W, H, E, R, E, D, O, Y, O, U, U, S, E, I, T, question mark. Right, those are two questions. Just with your group, see if you can figure out what the questions are, whether divisions between the letters are to create words, and answer the questions. So prepare and answer the questions. What? Shh. Okay, oh, that was quick, wasn't it? Tom, that was what, about half a minute?
Sorry?
That was half a minute that time.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question was,
What do you
Use it for?
and the second one was,
Where do you use it?
where do you use it? Now, before we look at the questions, just a note on that as a classroom activity. It's a nice way to do dictation with students that's slightly different. It's great for low levels because they always have problems with spelling particular vowels. So E and I and so on. Of course with you, you're proficient language speakers, so I deliberately went faster and faster and made it more difficult for you. It was very easy in the beginning. But even at that very slow pace in the beginning, for low-level students, it's a challenge. So it's a good idea to keep the pace, right for the level, basically. It's also a great activity to get a class to really settle down. If the class is being very lively and, a bit too much, you give them something like that and then totally concentrated. You probably noticed that you were trying to predict the words as you were typing, right? It's kind of a nice sort of mental activity. Okay, so basically that is a way of setting up a speaking activity. I dictated 2 questions and then you had to answer the questions speaking. So you could do this with any questions on the topic that you're working on in class at any time, and you just use your mobile devices. Okay, we'll come back to this in a minute, but first let's answer the questions. This image, you've probably seen these before, it's called an infographic. So originally this is one long image, but I had to cut it in half to get it onto the slide, of course. And these are the ways that people use their mobile devices, with at the top, the most common use, text messaging. You probably can't see the numbers at the back, but it's 92% for text messaging. It goes all the way down through photos, apps, gaming, right the way down to the bottom there. So, text messaging, how many of you use your mobiles for text messaging? Let's see if we're 92%. We're over 92. Okay. Taking photos? Browsing, emailing, downloading apps, gaming. How many of you use your phones for gaming? That's not 64%, that's less than half.
The computer scientist, of course.
What about Facebook? How many of you use it for Facebook? It's about the same number. I think it's about 60. What about this one here? Twitter. How many of you use it to tweet? Do you know that? Oh, it's just 3 of us. Right. What is that image? Do you know?
What is it?
I can see that.
What is that? What is it?
I use it.
What is it?
Foursquare. It's a geolocation app, so when you go somewhere you can drop a kind of pin to say you're there. And that sounds very pointless. But in some places, in some countries, certainly in the UK, if you're the person who's visited a place the most often, you get some kind of bonus, like a free cup of coffee or 20% off dinner or something. So sometimes it's worth doing. Most of the time it's completely pointless. Why would you not do it? Those things?
You get points for every time you come log in on a place. For example, if you go to Starbucks every day for your coffee, you log in every time you get there, you get points, and eventually, if you go there often enough, you become the mayor of Starbucks. So it's based on this idea of gaining points and so on. So it's not made by Starbucks. It's a kind of a free app, but savvy marketers like I'm saying, like the restaurants or Starbucks, have tapped into this and said, okay, so if you've got, X points on Foursquare, you get a free coffee once a week. So companies are using this in a very savvy marketing way. So there's only one of us in the group. I don't use it myself. In fact, I tend to find that there's a certain demographic who uses Foursquare.
You'd be very careful now.
Middle-aged men. So I don't know whether this, and you, yes, that was good exception. Yeah, so I personally don't use that myself. All right, what about where? What they've done in this infographic is that they've divided what's into tablets, phones, and e-readers, but we're not going to bother about those divisions. So, what about you? Watching TV? Just on the top left, do you put it there? Do you use your phone while you're watching TV? Lying in bed? Oh, come on, admit it. Where's everybody? All right, so what about this one? Waiting for something, like waiting for the bus or the train? That's pretty much 100%. Yeah. I love this one, in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Bar. Nice. It's a lovely bar where people are sitting and making bar. Attending a meeting or a class? Shopping and errands to check prices maybe?
Oh, I do.
Commuting, so going to work, yeah. Presumably not when you're driving, right? This is Spain, but other, playing golf. Playing golf? No? right. So we tend to be fairly active users of mobiles in this room, as far as I can see, and fairly similar to the information here. Okay. Quick move on to a very important concept. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so why would we want to bring mobile devices into the classroom? Well, one reason is to help students develop mobile literacy, which is this. This comes from Gavin and my latest book last year, Digital Literacies, and Gavin's actually going to be talking about digital literacies tomorrow, right, in his plenary. So this is just one of many literacies, and the one that I'm focusing on in this workshop. What's interesting here, though, is it's the ability to navigate, interpret, etc., but also contribute and communicate. So the idea of mobile devices is that not that you just consume information, but that you use them to produce. And we're going to look at what this means for the language classroom in a second. Before that, one more quote. Now, David Parry is the Assistant Professor of Emerging Media and Communication at the University of Texas in Dallas. And that's what he says. I must say, I think I agree with him. He's got a point, hasn't he? We're using mobiles more and more and more. But do we see them in education? Generally not. For a number of reasons that we will explore. But first, another hands-on activity. So again, take your device, your tablet or your phone. And you're going to work in your groups. And I want you to open up your photo album, the place where you keep your own photos. Just open it up for your own reference for the moment. Okay, now this is an activity where students work in groups, you can work in your same groups, and they share photos from their photo albums depending on a number of criteria. So you can choose to share or not to share. But in your group, you need to find one example of each of the following. So not one each, but one within the group. Here are the instructions. So for example, you need a picture of one pet in this whole group. One of you finds a pet, shows it, and then you can quickly talk a little bit about it. I'll give you quite a strict time limit for this, about 2 minutes, okay? So we need to go quite fast. Here we go. Now we will look at the group that hasn't stopped. There we go. Thanks. Okay, I cut you a bit short because I want to show you more activities. But in general, did you enjoy that one? Yes. There's only one answer to that question, by the way. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's personalized. The good thing is you choose the photos that you share with your group. You get to know more about the people that you're working with. It's a great speaking activity for students, especially for a new group where they don't know each other, so they can share information. And I noticed that some of you are saying, oh no, this is my son, and he's 6 and so on. And you just immediately want to share information about these important people and these important things in your life. So the language will come out to the student, the best of the student's abilities, basically. Just one comment though about classroom management. You will have noticed that 3 is kind of the maximum group size for this because of the size of your screens. It's actually quite difficult to see the photos with more than 3. So this group had 5. They with the iPad had no problem showing, but the rest of you were finding it difficult for everybody to see the photos. So this works best with 2 or 3 students, 3 max. 2 is ideal. Okay, fine. So another very simple classroom activity using mobile devices. Okay, fine.
This was meant for to be used with the target language, or
whatever you want. If you've been doing introductions with your students, you could use it to practice, who is this, how old is she, this is my mother, she's a whatever, teacher, etc. Yeah. It depends, the language generated depends on the level of the students. So you can use this activity with people like you, C1 and C2, no problem, still use the language. So these are just fluency. This is a fluency activity. Okay, bit of theory. This is a model which was written by a guy called Ruben Puentedura in 2010. There's a link there to his work, if you're interested. And he basically came up with this way of conceptualizing the complexity of tasks that use technology. So he's not talking about mobile-based tasks. He's talking about tasks using technology. But we're going to relate this to mobile, of course. So if you look at the bottom, substitution, the idea is that the technology, in this case, the mobile device, substitutes. It acts as a substitute for more traditional means. And there is no functional change to the task. Okay, so technology, mobile phones or devices, act as a substitute and there is no functional change to the task. His next level up is this idea of augmentation. So again, the technology is a substitute, but it improves the task in some way. So the use of the devices is in some way making the task a little bit better. Then we have the kind of two upper levels there. The idea of modification, so the technology, in this case mobile devices, allows for tasks to be redesigned. And then the final level, right at the top of redefinition, where the technology or the mobile devices allow you to create completely new tasks that just didn't exist before. So you can see how we start from substitution, same old stuff, just using the device, up to far more complex new task types. Now looking at that, that's kind of theoretical and a little bit difficult to understand what that means. And this is often the problem with research in our profession. There's a lot of this stuff going on, but there's very little what does it mean for practicing classroom teachers? What does it mean for me with my segundo de eso on Monday? What does that mean? What can I do with it? And that's what I want to talk about, is how we can translate this into classroom tasks. So let's think a little bit about giving you two tasks. The first one was a dictation, a letter dictation. Where would you put that on the scale?
Substitution.
Absolutely, because what could we have used instead of the mobile device? Paper. It would have been exactly the same task as paper. We would have written down the letters and we would have discussed in class. No difference. So why did I bother to use mobile devices? Could have used paper.
Well, actually, at some points, it can be viewed also as implementation, because if you use the automatic corrector of the mobile phone, then it helps you not only to take the dictation, but also to correct yourself when you are writing.
Yes, good point actually. You could use text prediction. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Yes, you could arguably, depends on the function that you're using, if you're using the corrector or not corrector and so on. But in general, it would definitely be down at the bottom end of the scale. Yeah, thanks for that, Antonio. So our second task was showing the mobile the photos and then using that as a discussion activity. Where would we put that on the scale?
Redefinition.
Redefinition, because something we've never done before?
I will say substitution.
I never bring my photo out in class.
No, exactly. But I remember that I would always say to students after the summer holidays in September, come back to school, bring some photos of your holidays. And then, of course, like 2 students would remember and the 28 students would forget. So in many ways, it's something that we've often done before, talking about our personal lives and so on. But it's definitely not here. I think it's here, augmentation, because your point, first of all, they've got the photos. They haven't had to bring them specially to class, they've got them already. So you've got that kind of augmentation. You could also then have them sharing photos. We didn't do that. They could choose one in the second phase of the activity and then share it with the group. Put it on a blog, write a caption, whatever it might be. So we could make it slightly improved, if you like, functional improvement. But basically, we're talking about a speaking activity that we've always done in our classes, based on personal information and family and so on. Okay, so we're down in the bottom half of the grid. There we are. I want to show you or describe an activity that I did when I was teaching last summer in July in Cambridge at a language school. And I did a kind of a action research project over 2 weeks, which involved using mobile devices in the classroom. There were 2 reasons for this. The first one was I wanted to trial activities that Gavin and I had written for our new book called Going Mobile, more of which later. And also I was commissioned to do a research project by the International Research Foundation on mobile. And I decided to do a practitioner-based project, because that's what often is not done. How does it actually work in the classroom? So these are my students. I have two groups, a beginners group and a lower intermediate group, an A1 group and a B1 group, low levels. This is the B1 group. And this is an activity that we did 2 or 3 days into the course. I just had this group for a week. We were using a course book. We had to use a course book. That was a requirement of the school. All the students had to have a course book and we had to use it in some way during classes. So my challenge was how to integrate these kinds of activities with the course book at the same time, to make them congruent and for there to be some kind of, continuity and reason to be doing it. So we were starting Unit 3, because I had come in the this is a summer school, by the way, where you have intensive courses. Students are working from 9 in the morning to about 3 in the afternoon. They have 3 hours in the morning with one teacher, and then they have more hours in the afternoon with a different teacher. So I was the morning teacher. 3 hours with these groups every day. As I came in, they had a teacher last week. I was the new teacher this week. We were starting Unit 3. I was kind of given the book. It wasn't a book I knew, but the title of the unit, Unit 3, was water. So I thought of trying a kind of slightly different, warmer activity. Now, what we often do when we start new units, right, it might be water or environment or whatever, we put the topic on the board and we get students to brainstorm, right? Write down words that they connect or put it on the board. So this time the idea was for them to take photos connected to the topic. So I put the topic on the board, water. I said, take your phones, go around the school. You've got 10 minutes and take 2 or 3 photos that you associate with water. So not photos of water, photos that you associate with water. And then come back. And off they went. And I wasn't really sure whether they would come back, but they did. And then we used an application called Chirp, which is a free iOS app which allows you to share things via Bluetooth. Okay, not Wi-Fi. We did have Wi-Fi in the school, but I tried it out. The problem with Chirp and sharing large photo files is that when you've got 10 people in the room passing things at the same time via Bluetooth, it kind of slows it down. So it wasn't ideal. If I did that again, I would use something like WhatsApp. I have a WhatsApp group for the class. Well, this is what they came up with. Students came back, working groups of 3, again, no more than 3 because of the size of the screens. They had to show their photos and describe to their group what the connection with water was. And then choose one and describe it to the class. And these were not very clear because these are copies of copies that the students took. But you can see the top left. Do you know what that is? Exactly, it's a machine where you keep the water. It's called a water cooler in English. So it's a water cooler. The one in the middle there on the top. A drain pipe, yeah. So actually this vocabulary was pretty complex. This is B1 level. The top right?
Basin.
The basin, yeah. One of the students said sink, but actually there's a difference between the basin and the sink. So as the students were describing their photos and saying why they'd chosen it, a lot of interesting vocabulary was coming out. Bottom left, this is a fountain. This is in the grounds of the school. This bottom middle one.
Is it watering the plant?
Yeah, it's a plant. It's a pot plant, in fact. And then the right-hand side there, bottom.
Fire extinguisher.
Yes, fire extinguisher. And of course, the students who'd chosen that one, everybody immediately went, well, that's not connected to water. How is it water? Oh, then this long discussion ensued about how you can get fire extinguishers that have water in them, not foam. And you got on Google and showed everyone. There was this incredible discussion went on over these photos, which I certainly hadn't expected. Now, this was interesting to me. First of all, the vocabulary that was generated was not very high frequency. I mean, drain pipe, water cooler. Those are not words that are important for B1 level. But it didn't seem to matter. The students wanted to be able to say the word, and I noticed them all writing down the words. You're never going to use drain pipe again in your life. Don't bother. But, you know, maybe they'll remember it, maybe they won't. They were exposed to vocabulary that they needed. The other thing was the sense of ownership that the students had with these photos. They had taken photos and they were going to describe how they were connected to water. It was a very different feeling in terms of motivation from getting students to write down words that they associate with water and then putting them on the board. There was a whole different level of ownership and engagement, and it turned into a speaking task much longer than I would have expected. So that's the kind of activity you can very easily do with any new topic in your classes. environment, I don't know, family, those typical transport, buildings, you know, the typical units that you get in the course book. Choose one that might work, give the students a time limit, send them around the school. They do come back, and then you get them sharing photos, and that again generates quite a lot of vocabulary and discussion about.
Did all your students share the same mother tongue?
No, I had a total mix. This group was quite a few Europeans. We had Brazilian, Argentinian. These two girls, one is Brazilian, one is Argentinian. We had a German guy, we had Chinese. What else did we have? A couple more. A whole mix. Okay. Yeah.
Do all students have mobile?
Good question. Yes. Okay. So now I went along. I arrived on Sunday night to go to class on Monday morning. School I'd never taught at. Students I had never met. I had absolutely no idea what they would bring. But a private language school in Cambridge in the summer. Classes cost £400 a week.
It probably is quite high.
Very high. Everybody had a device. Many people had two, especially the beginners group. I had a lot of Arabic students. I had 6 Saudi Arabian teenage boys. They were a challenge. 16-year-olds, many of them had 2 devices, one for England and one for home. A couple of people had tablets, but it was mainly Apple devices and a couple of Samsung devices. Everybody had smartphones, but I didn't know. So it was a case of, like today, I had no idea what you were bringing. What do I find? I find that most people have devices in high resource contexts. But we'll come back to this and what it means for task design, because that's a good question. Okay, right, let's go to our model again. I think I will put this here, the photo taking task. I will still put it in the bottom half of Quentin Duda's model because, you know, it was basically a brainstorming type activity. And it was functional improvement, it was fun, and so on and so forth. But we're still doing something we've always been doing in the language classroom in terms of language and task type. It's not a new task type. Okay, let's look at something slightly different. Do you know what this is?
QR code.
Yeah, do you know what QR stands for? Those QR codes? Gavin, you know.
Quick response.
Yeah, okay, quick response. Have you seen these before? Yeah, I think we have them on our badges. They're pretty much everywhere these days. Yeah, there's one on the board, actually, I noticed, outside. Okay, so there's a little bit of text at the bottom there, www, 28 weeks later. Do you know what that's referring to?
Salamanca?
Yes, exactly. It was a movie called 28 Weeks Later, which came out about, what, 4 years ago? Not sure. 5 years ago? No, I check on Google, but quite a while ago. It was about, it was a movie about a kind of a zombie virus that gets spread, and basically you catch this virus and you turn into a zombie. Okay, and that's the storyline. So this movie, has anybody seen this movie?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So it's interesting, this fascination with zombies that we have in our culture, isn't it? It's everywhere. So this was part of the advertising campaign, and here's another example. This is from London Underground. Again. And you can't quite see at the top, there's some text that says, spread the virus. At the top, it's very clear in the slide, but that was what was on the poster. Very clever idea for advertising, because a lot of people didn't really know what QR codes were yet. So there was this idea, so what is this? A kind of almost viral advertising campaign using paper, which is very traditional, but using this QR code thing. Very clever. Okay. How many of you have QR code readers on your phone? Put your hand if you do. 1, 2, okay. All right. So basically, to read a QR code, you need to have a special app on your phone. Bear with me, those of you who know this, but not everybody does. You need to have a special app which is called a QR code reader. And what that does is, you open up the app, it opens your camera, and then your camera scans the QR code and returns to you either a URL, so a web address, or perhaps a message. Okay, that's how it works. We don't have time for you to download QR code readers now, obviously, but those of you who do have QR code readers, if you could just make sure in your groups so you can see how it actually works. You've got one here, you've got one here. Do you have QR code readers? No? Anybody here in the middle? No, hang on, just Okay. Do you have one, you guys?
Wait,
No?
until you find a code.
Do one of you have a
See
QR
where
code reader?
the corners are. You put the camera so that the code's in the corners. And then it does something. I don't know, we'll see in a second.
Okay.
QR card.
Okay, can I have you ready with your QR code and QR code reader app open, which means your camera will be open. And on the next slide is going to be a QR code. And those of you who have the reader can scan it. So of course, those of you who don't have the reader, and then rush home after the workshop, download it from the App Store and try it out. Okay, that's what you do. So, the QR code on the next slide has an instruction. It's going to give you a text message, which is an instruction that you need to do. So we're going to see who reads it fastest by seeing who responds fastest to the instruction. Okay, so you need to get ready for the QR code. Ready? Okay.
Yeah!
Nobody else has managed to read it? Only Gavin?
Yeah. Which one should I
So in this case, it's just a bit of text, but then image.
So only Gavin managed
Welcome.
But it took a long time because of the Wi-Fi. I think.
Possibly.
Sure, if you're online.
You got it? Then it's Wi-Fi.
Okay, now, just so those of you who can see how that works, basically the camera read the QR code and returns a text message which said, if you're enjoying the workshop, stand up and say yeah. And then we So I'm ready for this. I'm getting the QR code on me.
But it doesn't have.
Okay, now, of course, if you were my students and I had you for a week, I would get you all downloading the QR code reader first. But seeing as we don't have time for that, download the QR code reader and try it out. You have it?
Always mobile.
Okay, you need to have a smartphone with it. Connection, good point. The one that I recommend is called, for making I've tried a lot of QR code readers. Some of them are So if you want a new QR code reader, try this one. It works on Android and on iOS. It's cross-platform and it's excellent. It works on BlackBerry as well. I think the whole reader is okay. So this is what people always say at this point in the workshop. How did you create it? Here we go. I used a free QR code generator, which is a QR code reader, and I was using a QR code generator. This one is called K1. It's free, you go along, you go use a laptop like this, yeah? Or a PC, or a computer. You go along to ky.com, and you see this page. And you see you have a number of options across the top. You have URL, you have text, you have phone number, SMS. Now, if you're going to use QR codes with your students, you probably want to either generate a web page for them to go visit, or a URL for them to visit the web page, or like I did, a text message with an instruction or something. You choose what you want, URL or text, and then you click on Generate Free here. Sorry, yeah. First you need to fill in the web address that you want. You're already creating a URL and QR code. Then we click on Generate Free and we get the QR code. And there it is. Now, you'll notice that the screen is full of stuff. And what you really want for your students is this. So if you click here on permalink, it will take you to the screen just with the image in the middle. And from there, you can take a screenshot or do whatever you like. So you get rid of all the stuff by just clicking here. when students scan that, they get a web address, and they can click on that and they can visit the web address. So you do need an internet connection to be able to use QR codes. Is that okay? Is that all clear? Easy. Extremely easy. Okay. Quick 2 minutes with your groups. How can you, if you do use them, or how could you use QR codes with students in class? Okay, I'm going to show you how I use this with my students. First, basically I wanted to try out QR codes with the students that I was teaching last year, last July, and with both classes, and there were some differences. This is my beginners group, so group B1 students, and the way we used QR codes for the first time in class was as follows. There is a link here to a blog post on my blog which goes through these steps in great detail, so I'll just give you just a quick summary of how it worked. Now, these were B1 students, A1, extremely low level. There were 10 Arabic speakers, 1 Chinese and 1 Russian. So not only extremely low level, they had huge script, property script, which was interesting for me having always taught in Spain, because I live in Barcelona. I've taught Spanish students for many, many years. I've never had problems with students having script issues before, so that was interesting. The way we did it was as a review activity, the sort of second day of the course. So the first day I got to know them, we did the dictation thing with the mobiles, and the second day I thought, try QR codes, see how it works. The first thing I asked them was I showed them a QR code. They'd all seen them before, but nobody knew what they were. Now this is a group of 12 students, aged between 16, 6 of them were 16 years old, up to about 45, but mainly between 16 and 25, 2 old people. Not that old, I mean 25 or so. They had seen them before, but they didn't know what they were. So I said, no, that's fine. First thing we do is we download the QR code generator, because we had Wi-Fi in class in the school. So they downloaded iEnigma, got that all sorted out, and then I did what I did with you. I got everybody ready, opening up the camera, getting ready, and then I showed them the QR code again. And they read it, and they got this message. And the message said something like, what are your 3 favorite foods? So it was a question. Now what we've been doing, and what they've been doing the week before with the previous teacher, was work on food vocabulary, sports, hobbies, the kind of typical beginner language, right? So what I've done was I prepared 4 QR codes, each one with a different question, reviewing the stuff they'd done the week before. So, what are your 3 favorite hobbies? What are your 3 favorite foods? What 3 things do you enjoy doing on the weekend? Because they've done enjoy plus ing, right? Like plus ing, enjoy plus ing is the structure. So I had 4 of these prepared. We did the first one together, so they understood how QR codes worked. And there was that aha moment, all kind of, oh, it was wonderful to see, because they'd learned something new about mobiles. Their mobile literacy, in fact, had been developed. It had nothing to do with language teaching. There was that moment of, okay, wow, I'm now more of a kind of digital citizen, if you like. So then I put the 4 QR codes on the 4 walls around the room, and the students had to walk around, read the QR code, which gave them the question. There were strips of coloured paper, this size, in the middle of the room. They had to read the question, pick up the strip of coloured paper, answer the question. So the question was, what are your 3 favorite foods? They had to write, I like pizza, hamburgers, and whatever. And then they had to stick them, and broccoli. Chocolate. So here's the QR code. You see it here, and then they had to stick their answers. These are 3 different answers from 3 different students, but not with their names. So they went around, you can see the students walking around, reading. Here they are writing on the bits of paper and sticking their answers next to the question. Okay? Now that phase of the class, they were working incredibly hard. It was total silence. They were concentrating, writing, especially for these students, the writing is hard work. So you can't actually see it, but you can see how they're writing. It's really, looks like children's writing because of the script. So that was fine. They finished that. Then I got them all to sit down, and I got 4 students to each take the QR code question plus the answers, sit down, and then read out the answers. The others had to listen and guess who had written the answer. So, for example, Gavin has the food question. He says, okay, this paper says, I like pizza, hamburgers and broccoli. And people say, okay, that must be, what's your name?
Lydia.
Lydia, that must be Lydia. Okay, so they're listening and trying to guess which classmate has written. And we did that for all 4 questions. For homework, they had to try and remember as much as possible and write up some sentences. Lydia likes pizza, hamburgers, and broccoli. Gavin likes listening to music and whatever information they can remember. So they're just recycling. So if you look at that as a review activity, we're reviewing vocabulary and structures, enjoy plus being in this case. It's a reading activity, because they're scanning and reading. It's a writing activity, because they're writing their answers. It's a speaking activity again, because they're reading the answers and listening. And they're listening with a reason, because they don't have the names. Right? So they're actually interested to hear about the broccoli, to try and guess who's the one who likes broccoli. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah, okay. So it's a review activity which practices all 4 skills. And at this level, A1, it took about 30 minutes. 4 questions, 30 minutes. Yeah? They really struggled with language.
Then what's the rationale for having the QR code?
Yes.
I mean, why don't you write it on the board?
Yeah, why don't I just put the questions on the board? Could easily have just been, I could have written what are your 3 favorite foods on the
Because
paper.
it motivates, maybe? Because you are involving things on devices, what they are using all the time.
Yeah, all of those reasons. It's motivating, it's different. They're expanding their their mobile literacies, in this case, by learning to use QR codes, which is a useful skill to have in life. It also gets them up, because I could have just put questions on the board and have them sitting. But in fact, moving around the classroom, I think for 3 hours non-stop in the morning. So there had to be moments where they got up and did stuff. You had to keep them alive, basically. But you're absolutely right. That could easily have been just done on paper. And this is why it's still at the level of substitution and augmentation.
The more organizational arguments, really.
Motivational, digital skills, using the devices that they have in class, but we're basically doing what we've always been doing in the language classroom. And this is, I think, one of the activities.
Brainstorming myself on why.
Yeah.
But then I came up with perhaps not everyone reads the same code, and then you get an information gap.
This is how you could do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that in a second, how you can use it in other ways. Just very quickly, the second way that I used it. So that first activity with QR codes was inside the classroom and was very simple. Linguistically, it was review language. It was simple. The new skill was the kind of QR code and it's a group activity. The second one was a little bit more complex. This was a few days later. This is now the intermediate group. I did this with both groups. And what we did was a treasure hunt around the school. And we had 10 things, questions, that they had to do in different parts of the school, where class, activity zone, dining room, lecture theatre, reception, learning centre, room 1.11. Room 1.11 was where the Director of Studies was, and then back in class here. So basically I prepared 10 QR codes before class, each one with a thing to do. And for example, what they had to do was in the activity zone, they had to find 2 things that are happening this weekend in Cambridge. By going to basically the social centre, because the school social centre, looking at the information that was available and writing down 2 things that were happening in Cambridge that weekend. The one for the dining room, they had to find out how much the spaghetti was for that day. I think that was the dish of the day, how much it cost. And they had to take a picture of some green food. Again, these are very simple tasks. The one in the learning centre, which is the library, they had to find 2 books for beginners that they thought looked interesting and take a photo of the cover. For room 101, they had to interview the Director of Studies, and they first had to ask, prepare questions to find out about her family and her hobbies, what she enjoys doing on the weekends again. And they had to audio record the interview, so here it is, they're working pairs. This is Catherine, she's the DOS, Director of Studies in the school. These are 2 of the students, a Chinese guy and he's Italian. They're both holding their mobile phones. They've prepared the questions standing outside the room. And then they go in to Catherine and they record. They've got their questions and then they record her. And then for homework, they had to write up a paragraph about her by re-listening to the recording. Okay? So you get the idea. They're doing 10 different things. But they're using all of the different affordances of mobile devices except video. They're recording, they're taking photos, and they're taking notes. So they could be working on paper, but they also need to use their mobile devices. All right? Logistics for this meant I had to go and speak to the people in reception, for example, and to Catherine, the DOS, the day before, make sure she was going to be there, and that she was okay with this, of course, get her permission. Reception was interesting. In reception, there were 3 people working in reception. They had to find out the names and surnames of 2 of the people, and write them down, the beginners, yeah, so spelling and writing, and then they had to ask permission to take photos of the 2 people. So when I went to reception the day before, I said, look, the students are coming, they're going to ask you this, they're going to ask you if they can take photos, is that okay? And one of the people said, that's fine, and the other woman who was there, she said, no, I don't want my photo taken. So that's perfect. Because the student's going to ask for permission, and you're going to refuse, which is fine. I mean, that's real life. So of course the logistics had to be in place a little bit for kids getting permission and so on. So we spent quite a long time. The problem with beginners group, for me, very frustrating because working with monolingual groups in Spain, I can give instructions in Spanish and then they just go and do it. I had to give instructions for this with beginners in English. And for them to get their heads around the fact that they were working in pairs, that they had to go around the school, that I had one pair starting with number 2, another pair starting at point 5, another pair starting at point 7, and another pair starting at point 9, so that they weren't all together in reception. That was, and I thought I explained it, and then they all went off, and I went to go check, and I came back to the class, and 2 of them were sitting there. They just had left. They hadn't quite got the idea. So with low levels, when you're doing a complex task, it's great if you can give the instructions in the first language, and then they can do the task, which is the language learning part. Again, there's a link here to the very detailed step-by-step guidelines on how to do this yourselves, if you want to, plus a few logistics and classroom management tips. Okay? So these are 2 ways to use QR codes in the classroom. But to go back to Tom's point, we're still down here. Those instructions instead of QR codes could be given just written out on paper, right? So we're still doing fairly traditional classroom activities. Now's the moment we've all been waiting for. We're going to get up here where things get a little bit different. Let's have a look at some of the activities you can do here. But you'll notice that we've started here with the students. And I think this is not a bad thing. When you're starting to use mobile devices with the students, you don't really get up here and have them all kind of freaking out. Slow introduction, and especially for teachers, if you're involved in teacher training, then this is where teachers feel comfortable. I mean, who feels uncomfortable with their dictation? It's not difficult, it's not challenging, it's something fairly traditional. So this is a good way for teachers who are not sure where to start, and for students who might find it a little bit too much otherwise. Okay, basically the top part of that grid is where we look at some of the special affordances or the special properties of mobile devices. And those are things like augmented reality and geotagging. Okay, if you're familiar with these terms, could you put your hand up? You've heard of augmented reality and geotagging? Okay, not most of you. Right. Alright, well here's augmented reality. It's sort of like a QR code reader, but instead of QR code, it's reading reality. So you're opening up your augmented reality app on your phone. It's opening a camera and it's working out where you are through geolocation, and it's giving you information about what it sees in the camera. So here we are, we're standing in Sydney, in front of the Sydney Opera House. We've opened up our augmented reality app, and it's giving us information. We can click on these things, and go online and find out further information. So you do need to have an internet connection for this to work, and a smartphone, obviously. Yeah, so that's augmented reality. It's reality which is augmented or made better in a way. Oh, sure. Who is it?
Yes. Sorry, could you please close the windows?
So this particular app is called Nicky. It's available for Android and for iOS, and it's free. You can try it out while you're in Ávila. If you have a 3G connection here, download it and try it out tonight in Ávila. Go to the cathedral. Open it up and see what you find out about Ávila Cathedral. See how it looks. Another augmented reality device you've probably heard of is Google Glass, right? Yeah, you know about that? Basically, it's the same thing. It's instead of looking at your smartphone, you can actually see these things from these kind of perspex lens, if you like. You can see this thing projected, so you can have your Facebook status updates projected. You can open up YouTube and you can see this when you look at the Ávila Cathedral without actually doing that. Okay? Wearable technology. But I want to show you a usable form of augmented reality. What does it mean for students? What you get to do in the classroom? And one thing you can do is to get them to create book reviews. And I want to show you a free AR app, augmented reality app, called LAYAR, L-A-Y-A-R. What I did was I took this book and I created a marker. I sort of use this as a marker. What it means is that the app will read this and layer on some information. Okay, so let's see how it works. This has how it does work. Okay, so I've got layer on this one. Okay, so you can see I've opened up layer. Got that? And it's reading, it's looking through the camera. So we're going to put it over my marker here. And you can see what it's done. It's reading this and it's layered over that video. There's no video on here. It pops it up. You can see how it moves. Also has annoying advertising, which is why it's a free app. Now, the great thing is that I can actually click on this, and I'm not sure whether the connection is going to be strong enough, but it'll take me now to that video, which is on YouTube. And of course, I created the video earlier, right? So what I did was I created a video, I put it on YouTube, and then I made this into a marker using layout. And that sounds quite scary and complicated, but it's not. Believe me, I have no technical training whatsoever. I'm a teacher and a teacher trainer. You just walk through screens to do this. It's all there. So there we have YouTube. Open it. And we have a video. It's a little slow, the connection, sorry. The video is It's a very slow connection, yeah. But you can see it's trying to open. You get the idea. You see the application for your students? You get students to choose a book. Maybe it's a book in Spanish that they particularly love. Any book, or a book that they've been reading. Here comes the video. Yeah, it's going to keep stopping because of the connection. Okay, we haven't got a good enough Wi-Fi connection. But you can see how it works. Okay. So you get your students to choose a book that they like. Maybe it's an English book that they've had to read for class. Maybe it's a favorite book, whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, they choose a book. Then they create a video with them talking about the book. It doesn't have to be them talking to camera. It could be just a video of the cover of the book and then talking about whatever. You give them guidelines to describe the plot, whatever it might be, a series of questions. They create their videos and they put them on YouTube. Then you get them to download layout. You need to do this on a PC to create the markers, not on a mobile device. Okay, you can use the mobile device to read the markers, but you create the markers on the PC. You get them to work through the screens, and all it means is they need to have an image of the book cover. So I created this one by taking an image of this, which is a photo. I turned it into an image, and I uploaded it to layout, and I linked that image to the YouTube video. So that's all it's doing. It's basically using image recognition, saying, okay, I'm going to recognize that one from that picture she took, and have that link, and it's overlaying the YouTube video as an embedded thing, rather than a URL. So it's not that complex.
What's the name of the program again?
LAYAR, L-A-Y-A-R. L-A-Y. Okay? So you can see how we can apply some of these slightly more sophisticated and complex mobile tools into the classroom as well. But in terms of language, what we're doing is what we've always done, right? A book review. We just get our students to write the book reviews, to sit in pairs and talk about their favorite books. We're doing something a little bit more sophisticated, and you can set up in your library a whole book review day or a book fair. Why not have competition in school? Get them with the different classes creating books. Put the books around the library. And that's the thing, we want students mobiles and mobile devices. So you can have your students working with their phones or their tablets, walking around, looking at the book on the table, using layout, getting the video headphones, listening to the reviews, and you can have a review sheet, which book did you like most, which book is most interesting, which one would you like to read, and so you can see how you can develop this into a project. Yeah, you all with me? I can see looks of skepticism in the back there. I think this is also why we go back to Puente Dura's model. I mean, if you're not confident with technology, you start at the substitution level. If you are confident with technology, you can start further up the food chain, if you like, a slightly more sophisticated performances. What are we doing for time? Okay, let's start again. So we've looked at we're right up now in Puente Dura's, the top end of things, and we've looked at augmented reality, which is a fairly sophisticated concept, and technically it's not difficult, but it's new to you, so they take a while. So believe me. Another slightly more sophisticated concept, if you like, is this idea of geotagging. That's what Gavin described at the beginning, about how he uses Foursquare. So Foursquare is a geotagged app. You go along to Ávila Cathedral, it figures out where you are, and it's a place that is on Foursquare. You have to check in to Ávila Cathedral. You can try it out. Foursquare is great. And you get points, right? So that's based on geotagging, geolocation, geographical location. Because your phone knows where you are. And so does Google. And so does, in fact, surveillance, NASA surveillance in the US. Exactly right. All right, this is an example of a geotagging activity, language activity. Now, this is an app, a free app called Voices, with a W. This Voices. It's free. You can use it on Apple devices and on Android. And the way it works is as follows. You download it, you can try this out as well while you're here at Ávila. You download it onto your phone, you go to a place, for example, Ávila Cathedral, you open up Voices. It figures out where you are, and it gives you a list of audio recordings based on your location. So I haven't tried it here in Ávila, but I will do, because I have a 3G connection here in Spain. A list of audio recordings on locations around there, probably in the cathedral. You look at them, you think, oh, that looks interesting. Click on it, listen to it in your headphones. It may be information about the cathedral, it may be done by a professional guide, or it may be done by a language student, you never know. I live in Barcelona, I've been there 25 years. I know Barcelona quite well, but there is a park which I didn't know very well. It's not very well known. It's near where I used to live in Barcelona, on the outskirts. And I went along to have a look at it, and I thought I'll just try Voices and see what information is, because nobody really knows about this park. It's got an old labyrinth. And I got a list of recordings, including this one. And if our connection allows us, I just want you to listen to the first minute or so of this. Okay, so this is what I heard. This is the Voices recording. You can see at the top there, it's a Voices address. It's an audio recording online.
The Labyrinth Park is an historic garden and the oldest preserved in Barcelona. Inside the park, there are an 18th century neoclassical garden and some 19th century romantic style gardens. The park covers an area of 9 hectares, and everywhere you can find a high number of sculptures, some with motifs from Greek mythology and other rustic motifs, and a large number of fountains, pools of water, and even a waterfall. At the bottom of the park, there is a planned labyrinth that gives name to the park, consisting of 750 meters.
Okay, you get the idea, yeah? So this is basically by clicking here. This is a screenshot. which is why I click here myself. You click here and that's what you hear. And this is obviously a Spanish language student doing a recording on this spot. So he's done the research, he's also prepared. You can hear that it's quite scripted. It sounds like the student is actually reading rather than doing ad lib. So that affects the delivery. But you can see how easy it would be to have this in your classes. So after I've done this, I thought, well, I'm going to try this out the next time I teach a group of language students. So when I was in Cambridge, that's exactly what I did. My intermediate group, the beginners group, a little bit too challenging for them. They really were very low-level students. But with the beginners group, I told them to, in class, to choose a favourite place in Cambridge. They'd all been there for at least 3 or 4 days. Some of them had been there for a couple of months. To choose a favourite place in Cambridge and to research it. So they all chose different places. Some chose the river, some people chose some of the Cambridge colleges, which are very famous, and my Chinese student chose the science park. There's apparently a very famous science park in Cambridge, and that was his interest. So he chose that. And then I gave them half an hour to research on the internet with Google, with their devices, make notes, get ready, and then record. And to record, they had to go around to different areas in the school to be quiet. Now, the great thing about voices is that you don't need to be at the place to record. So my student didn't need to be at the science park to record his recording. He was in the school while he did it. So in fact, this is my user account because he hadn't bought his device that day. So I lent him my phone and he used my account. But the link is there if you want to listen to my student, my Chinese student, who had real pronunciation challenges. That was his weakest area. He was fabulous on grammar, and he was very weak on pronunciation. So he'd spent a lot of time rehearsing and so on, and then he struggled. So he recorded his, his stuff about the science park, and then saved it. And when you save the recording, you can pin it to a map. You can decide where it goes. So in theory, your students here in Spain could be making recordings, audio recordings, about the Sydney Opera House. And then they pin their recording to Australia. So people who go to the Sydney Opera House can open up voices and they could hear your students, in theory. You can see how it works. But this is the great potential for this, that you can actually do with the preparation in class. Because that's what the students need. They need the language support, they need the preparation time, and they need the rehearsal time. That's the important bit. The actual recording is kind of the last bit, I would say. The bit at the end. It's all the work that goes before. So you could also have your students doing all the preparation in class, rehearsal and so on, and then recording for homework at home, if they have connections. It's really not the important bit. Recording, the physical recording is not the important bit. And then in the next class, the students actually listen to each other's little audio guides, if you like, about the famous places in Cambridge. So this is also, it's a really, really nice app, very easy to use and free.
There's one recording,
One recording, I wonder if they can language students.
No, it's 5 seconds long, so I think it's sort of just trying.
Okay. Okay, so we've looked now at the kind of upper end of Ruben Puentedura's model, right? We've looked at activities that kind of work on special affordances, on special properties of mobile devices. But if you think about it, we're still doing language activities, aren't we? That's what we are, we're language teachers. So we still need to have the language, communicative, creative element in us. And technology is kind of additional to that. It's the least important part, if you like. I often find teachers thinking, geotagging, vector drills is complicated, but actually no, it's language that we're dealing with here. We're just using a slightly different tool to ones that we've used before. But there are considerations. Here are some of them. From my own experience working with these students at 2 different levels, what I found is that you need to stage the kinds of tasks that you do, from simpler tasks to more complex tasks. So with my A1 beginners group, there's no way I could have looked in on day 1 and done voices activity with them. It's just, they're not familiar enough with the potential of their own devices, although they were mainly 16 years old. And also linguistically, it just would have been too complex. So we kind of started easily with dictation, and the same with the intermediate group. We need to start from a kind of simple approach, especially if students have never used mobile devices in class for learning. I did an entrance questionnaire with both groups to find out how they use their mobile devices for learning. What do you think? Do you think they used them? No. The only thing they used were translation apps. That's it. They used nothing else on their devices for language learning. And that was in both groups. And this apparently, I've read research elsewhere that this is the tendency. That students may use some apps out of class, but that's about it. They don't use them in any other way, and the teachers are not integrating them into school. So, starting from staged, from simple to complex, in my case, relating the task to the syllabus. So, if you're doing the unit on travel, that's where you do the thing on voices, yeah? Where they do things on famous landmarks. Getting the language production in class, so the rehearsal, the preparation, that's what happens in class. If necessary, the technical bit, if you like, the creating of the book review video, or the creating of the audio recording can happen out of class. But language is what needs to happen in class. This idea of bridging in and out of class, so using the devices, sending them around Cambridge, getting them to listen to voices in locations and then reporting back. So you're kind of getting them to use their devices out of class but bringing them back into class and relating the two. In Gavin and my new book, we have quite a few activities that do this, but of course, it's very much reliant on connections. So what I found with my group was they were all foreign students, so none of them were locals. They had smart devices, but where did they have connectivity? In the school, Wi-Fi, and in the host families or the student residence, Wi-Fi. That was it. They had nothing in between. They didn't have 3G connections. So that seriously affected the kinds of tasks I could do. I wanted to have them tweeting, for example, at 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 8 o'clock every day from wherever they were in Cambridge, saying, hey, you know, I'm hanging out with such and such, here's a photo. I couldn't do that because they didn't have the connections. So here, where your students have already got their 3G connections, you can be a lot more inventive and have them doing these kind of bridging activities, reporting back and so on. We have a few of those types of activities outlined here, but I haven't been able to show you any because I couldn't do it with my students. Okay, I've put there the other day, life beyond apps. I find this often with teachers that they think that mobile learning is apps. Of course, apps is one thing, but it's a very limited use of mobile devices. There's much more you can do. Apps is fine, do your flashcards out of class, whatever, great. But let's do some more interesting stuff as well, using the affordances of mobile devices. Okay, from this research project, this action research project I did, 6 sort of things became clearly apparent. I think this is what we've got using mobile devices. The first one was Lydia's point right at the beginning. She said, how did you know the students would have devices? Well, I did. You need to find out. What devices do they have? Do they have smartphones or not? Do they have connectivity? Do they have 3G or not? That's going to affect what you can do and can't do. The idea of mobility. Now, when we talk about mobility and mobile learning, we often tend to think that mobile means the thing, the technology. But mobility can mean the device. It can also mean the learners being mobile. So are your learners walking around the classroom with their devices? Are they going around the school? Are they going around the town? There's mobility involved in that sense. So we have the devices are mobile, the learners are mobile, and we also have the learning experience. To what extent is that mobile? So the fact that I'm sending my students out to listen to audio recordings from voices in specific places, the whole learning experience becomes mobile. Or I get them to tweet to the group at 6 o'clock and write a line about what they're doing. The learning experience is becoming mobile. You see the difference? Yeah? Those 3 sort of levels I think are useful to keep in mind. The third point is this technological complexity. So obviously augmented reality markers, keep that until a little later into the course and start with something simple. Build up, don't throw them in terms of technological complexity, and don't expect your students, because they're 16 or 18 or 20, to know what QR codes are or how to create AR markers. Many of them have no idea at all. They're all excellent at Facebook, but that's about it. In terms of technological expertise, they are often quite limited. They may be very comfortable with technology, but they're not very savvy with technology. This idea of linguistic and communicative competence, you need to kind of balance that with the complexity of the technology. So with the QR codes, I started with a very simple review task because I wanted the language not to be a big deal. I'm dealing with QR codes. But the second QR code task, they already knew about QR codes, the language was far more complex and far more demanding because they weren't hung up on how does that work, we can move on. So you need to balance those two parts. Technological complexity on one hand and linguistic or communicative complexity on the other. And make sure that they're not overloaded in both of those, especially for low levels. The type of mold, now this is from a book written by a colleague of Gavin and mine, Mark Pegram. He's written a fantastic book, which is just about due out. If you're into mobile learning, you've got to get it. It's called Mobile Learning. It's got a very nice little byline. Hang on, Mobile Learning languages. Mobile Learning, languages, literacies, and cultures. And he has a very nice way of looking at types of mobile assisted language learning, types of mold. The first one is the idea of content mold. This is a useful way of understanding it because it kind of makes you aware of what's available instead of thinking what's apps. No, this helps to kind of see the map, if you like, the lay of the land. We have content mold, which might be reading ebooks on your device, or reading magazines, or listening to podcasts, or watching videos. So content, your device as something with content for your language learning. He has content mold, then tutorial mold. Tutorial mold would be something like flashcards. So it's not that you're just kind of swallowing content, you're actually having to match definitions, and you're recycling, and there's a little bit more interaction, but it's all automatic from the machine. It's a machine and read, but it's helping you learn. Flashcards is a very good example of this. Tutorial mold. It's not really interactive, is it? It's kind of automatic. Useful though. His third category is creation mold. So now we have students creating texts, audio, video, images. So for example, in my class there, we have the students just creating their photos. That's creation mold, which is then a stepping stone to communicative work. And his fourth category is communication mold. So when you have them sharing things through networks, tweeting at 6 o'clock with a photo and a caption. See how these are very different things. We have content, tutorial. Content and tutorial sit very well with the behaviorist view of learning. Yeah, they're fairly traditional. Creation and communicative mold sit closer or better with an idea of communicative teaching. But they're not mutually exclusive. You can have all of those together in a single activity in class. It's not like one's better or one's worse. But you want to make sure you cover all four and you don't stick with tutorial mold, flashcard apps, which are useful in their own right, but there are also other areas. Okay, does that make sense? It's a very good way to kind of see the whole vista, if you like. Okay, how are we doing for time? 20 minutes. 20 minutes, all right.
What was the name of the book you were talking about?
By Mark Pegram. It's called Mobile Learning. Languages, literacies, and cultures. It's just about to be published. The summer, yeah. Mark Pegram, our co-writer on this one. Mark.
Which publisher?
Mark Pegram. Publisher Routledge. Routledge. Yeah, he's a really, really good writer. Mobile learning, languages, literacies, and cultures. Yeah, Mark Pegram. Okay, let's go back to some of the choices and the challenges. As you can see, I've already sort of explained some of the ways I dealt with the choices and challenges in my context, because they're at different levels. We're going to listen to a video by a teacher in Brazil called Carla Arena. Now, Carla started integrating the use of mobile devices into her classes probably about 2 years ago. She's been doing it for quite a while. She works at a school called the Casa Thomas Jefferson in Brasilia. It's a fairly big school with a number of branches around the place. And Carla was instrumental in getting the school to find class sets of iPads. And she started off this entire project. They've been running for about 3 years now. So here she's talking about the beginning of the project, where she got the school to get the class sets of iPads, and she looks at some of the challenges that were involved and how she got the teachers on board. So a lot of really interesting first-hand advice in this video. So if you are interested in doing this in your institution, she has some great ideas. I'm going to give you a link end of the talk to lots more resources, which includes Carla and several other video studies of people talking about how they've used it. But at the moment, just listen to Carla, take some notes if you're interested. I'm afraid.
We have 40 iPads in 2 different school branches. The main goal is to enhance classes with technology in a way that is meaningful for students. It's a student-centered classroom. We still have just the 2 sets of iPads, like 20 in every school branch. We are still in the piloting phase because we want to expand that to all our school branches. We have 6. So in this phase, the main goal is to make teachers comfortable with the technology and work with them in the sense that they should use the iPad for student production, not just reproduction of what they did in the past with the books. We have Mac Fridays, which is really great, it's really informal. We have different levels of digital proficiency, so the more experienced ones work with the less experienced ones. Plus, it's a blended type of training, so online we have a wiki where we post like the students' projects, apps, ideas, lesson plans, everything. At first, of course, it's training the teachers and making them feel comfortable and willing to give it a try. And the technological infrastructure. We still have problems with the Wi-Fi in my school. First, I think we need to study a lot, like in terms of how the logistics is going to be. So, what do you want to achieve with this learning project? Second, you need to involve a team to buy the idea and really to make them feel comfortable so that they can multiply good practices. And the third piece of advice is to take the consultancy course. It's really helpful.
Okay, Carla was one of the first students or teachers on one of our online training courses called Learning and Practice. We have one actually starting on the 2nd of June, just in case you're interested, fully online. Okay, so she has some great advice there. I mean, things like infrastructure and Wi-Fi and that sort of thing. Not just the hardware or the infrastructure, but also teacher training and getting everybody on board. Because what I found when I was in Cambridge, so I went for 2 weeks, I got my groups of students, I worked with them with mobile devices, and then I left. And the classroom next door, I was going into class, teacher next door was going into class with a big cardboard box that said mobile. So she was walking in, the students were putting their mobile devices into the cardboard box for 3 hours. She'd give them back during the break and then taking them in again in the next class. So within an institution, you really need to have some kind of implementation plan in practice for this to work and teachers to be on board. And that involves, as Carla says, the training, the implementation plan, and so on. I'm going to give you a link at the end to resources that include an extract from our new book, Going Mobile, which has a 10-step implementation plan. And the 10 steps are actually there on the link. You can download the sample. But that is important, I think, for some kind of continuity. Let's just revisit some of these questions from the beginning and see if you have any new insights, or you may have changed your mind or have a bit more of an idea of how to answer these. You'll see that I've cunningly cut the last letter off every single word at the end there on the right. You'll have to finally remember what those were. In your groups again, just a couple of minutes to revisit these questions, or if you don't want to revisit them, just share what you think you've learned from the session so far, whichever you prefer. Okay, you look extremely tired. Well done for sticking with us for 2 hours. Just very briefly to sum up, I mean, I think probably you've got a slightly different insight on some of these questions now. Using the mobile devices or class sets, it depends on your context. So when I was in college, there were no class sets. It was with their own devices, yeah? So it's BYOD, bring your own device. HYOD approach is in fact becoming more and more popular because, especially in contexts like ours, it's a high resource context in Spain and generally in Europe. Yeah, our students do tend to have devices, and it's not necessary for everybody to have the latest iPhone. You can have students working in pairs. So in fact, it's better if you can have them working in pairs. But students do want to use their own devices. They've found in research that there's a sense of ownership where students use their own devices that they don't have with the class sets. But of course, if we're talking about primary school, we're not talking about your own devices, yeah? So it depends on the context. Some schools have implemented what's called a hybrid approach. So students can use their own devices if they want, or here are the 10 iPads, would you prefer an iPad? And again, they found students prefer their own devices, even if the iPads are more sophisticated, because of this ownership issue. So again, there's no black or white answer here, it depends on the context. The second one, how do they stay on task? Well, make the tasks interesting and engaging. So for the dictation task, you are all totally on task for that. Now, of course, once that's finished, and if I start talking along and going about the present perfect and the auxiliary verb to, very soon, Facebook updates.
Yes.
This is a question of classroom management. So if my students have been working on their devices, I've given them the dictation, so okay, everybody check, right, do the discussion, okay, now, put your phones down, face down, on the desk, where I can see them. Okay, now we do the auxiliary verbs, and then we move on to something a little bit more interesting, and we pick this up again and so on. So actually, mobile devices are great for classroom management because you can see them, especially things like iPads, close the cover, and I can see what the students are doing. With laptops, I can't see, for example, the lady over there right now is doing her Facebook updates, and I can't see, unfortunately. Whereas if you were doing them, I'd be able to see. Okay, so classroom management and I think good task design and having a clear reason for using them and having language being generated for that period of time, now we move on to something else. What activities can students do? Well, I've described some. You probably want to go with the Pentadura model in terms of staged complexity. In our book going mobile, we have loads. We probably have about 60, 70 activities? 60? Yeah, all sorts of stuff you can do at varying levels of complexity. The focus is always on language, though, of course. Should devices be used in or out of class? I think both, but it's going to depend on their connectivity of class. That will affect task design. And then the last point, what about if mobile devices are banned? Are any of you in that situation? Put your hand. 1, 2. Yeah. Okay, only 2. I would have thought maybe more people would be in this situation. There, what you have to do is convince the powers that be in your school about the benefits. And that means showing them this kind of stuff. I mean, you can't deny that the students' language learning is not enhanced through these kinds of activities, right? We also have a very clear implementation strategy. And the first step is to get, like Carla said, you need to get all the stakeholders on board. So that means the management, parents. If you're working with young learners, you have got to have parents on board. They've got to understand why. And there's got to be buy-in from everybody. Parents, students are also difficult. Admin is sometimes, administrators are sometimes tricky. Again, the link I'm going to give you in a second has a 10-step implementation plan if you're interested. So the top link will give you the sample, which has got a couple of activities, plus this implementation plan thing. The book's going to be out in a couple of months, sometime this summer. And then we have our Learning and Practice online training course, which starts next month. Again, there's some information there. If you would like to sign up to receive information about our online teacher training courses, then please just fill in your name and your email address on these sheets. There's one here, one in the back, one in this one. And take a card. And you can take on my cards if you want, which are here. Just a QR code. And I'm going to give you my contact details on the next screen, Twitter and so on and so forth. Writing down there.
Sorry, you're using the mobile device to make a presentation.
Yes. Yes, actually this is, this is a very old iPhone, which is why I've had to connect it to a battery because it crashes every time. So I don't really have to have this decent phone. but I'm using something called Keynote Remote, which Gavin told me about. Keynote is like PowerPoint, like for the iPad. And what I do is I just scroll through the slides here. So I move this back. See that changes on the screen? And here are my contact details. Okay? So I hope you found this useful. I have to say thank you for staying awake for 2 hours. That's a very, very long time. Nobody's actually snored. So I hope you found it useful, some ideas. Drop me an email if you know what you're trying to out with students. Go out and spread the word about the devices.